Well, hello there. Ellouise Schoettler here, your storyteller, and we're back to talk about things that have to do with stories. And today I'm going to talk a little bit about quarantines. We're in a quarantine right now for the COVID-19, but this is something different that I've remembered, and I thought you might be interested in it. In 1943, Charlotte, North Carolina felt that the polio came sweeping down through that town, through all of North Carolina, I don't know where else. And they were scared for their children because the polio was looking for kids. That was really what they were after. And so they had rules that turned out to be a quarantine, a restriction. Don't go anywhere. Don't play with anybody that you don't know. I was 8 years old. Don't play with anybody that you don't know. Stay in your own yards. Don't go out any place. And it was hard. Even just when it first started, it was very hard. I'm thinking of the children that are there today and the rules that they have to deal with and the parents have to deal with. My mother, we were living in a 12-family apartment house at that time because my father was in the Army Air Force. And so he had been shipped out to India. He was an airplane mechanic, and he was there to make everything go. They were in India, and he was on a base that was near what they call the hump. So they had to be sure that those planes going out over those mountains to China were safe and well fitted for the men that had to do that job. And so Daddy was gone. Mother had 3 children, 3 girls. I'm the oldest. Linda, the second one, is 2.5 years younger than me. And Kathy, the youngest at the time, was about a year old. And because he was in the Army and everything, she had to get a job. So she worked across town at the air base. But fortunately, a woman named Emma came to us every morning and stayed until Mama got home every evening. And I loved Emma, and she seemed to love us, and we had a good time. And sometimes she had told me before that I could go up to the A&P grocery store to get something that she needed. And I knew how to do that. It was only about 5 blocks away. And then they started saying that children couldn't leave the property, couldn't go anywhere or what. And I just wanted to. I can remember that. I can go there. I can do this. I know I can do this. And I wasn't thinking about that quarantine or polio at all. So I slipped out of the building, went around the building into the alley, went down the alley, out to the street, and up to Central Avenue. I knew it very well, knew exactly where I was going. And so I got out on Central Avenue, and the train came. The train, it did, and it stopped right there. It did it twice a week, twice a day. And so I knew about that, what to do. I should stand on the sidewalk waiting for the train to leave. And I kept hearing this car honking its horn, and I turned around, and it was my grandmother. And she had her hand out the window, and she was waving for me to come on back. And so I did. I came back, and I got in the car, and she said, not even in her nicest voice, "What are you doing out here?" And so I said, well, I wanted to go get some gumballs. I'd like to have some gumballs. And she said, well, you're not getting those gumballs today. We're taking you home. And we did. That night, I think that there was a long phone call, maybe 2 phone calls between my mother and my grandmother, Nanny, that was Daddy's mother, and her mother, Granny. And they had decided that my leaving the yard was dangerous and that they couldn't deal with it. They had to figure out a way to help it. So they called Sacred Heart Academy in Belmont, which was 15 miles away, and asked Mother Benignus if there were any beds there that she could take in 2 little girls, because their daddy was gone to war and their mother was working, and all of her story, and that my mother was scared to death that her children would be hurt. Well, they had space because they didn't have any children there. It was the summertime. They weren't having a boarding school at this time. There were Linda and me were going to be 2 of the kids, and then there were 3 others who were in the same position that we were. The mother had called and said she really needed help. So we went over. Now, I was excited at first. I was 8.5 years old. I was very excited. And we marked our clothes up and everything. And then we got over there and our clothes were in a trunk, and we went into a dormitory, and I was in one room, and Linda, who was 2 years younger, went into another room. We could see each other, but we weren't side by side. It was a little shocking. But the nun who was in charge of us, Sister Raymond, was very sweet, helped us get settled in. Now, this was the thing. I had never seen a nun in my life. They didn't come to the church that I went to, Catholic church, but there weren't any nuns there. So I didn't quite know who they were, what they were about. Well, the next morning we got up, and a little woman came running in there, and she said, "Oh, girls, which one of you is who?" And I said, "Well, I'm Ellouise." And Linda says, "Oh, I'm Linda." And she says, "Well, hello there. I'm Sister Loyola, and I'm in charge of you. So now let's be sure that you've got everything you need on, and then I'll take you over to the refectory to eat." That's what they called it. "And then we'll go out, and we have work to do this morning." She wasn't but 4'1". And so she and Linda and I were really pretty chummy because we were all pretty much the same thing. We went for our breakfast, and then we went down, and there were string beans and lima beans and peas and other things that Sister Loyola was supposed to be fixing that day so they could be cooked and canned. Now, the Sacred Heart was also a farm that fed all these sisters from all over the state of North Carolina that had come home to be home for the summer. There was a lot of work to be done, and so she used us to help her. I'd never done beans and peel peaches and this sort of thing. We did it every day except Saturday and Sunday. And so we learned a lot that our little hands could do. And when we took a break, middle of the morning, she taught us our prayers. We sometimes sang, and she read us out of a book. She read us stories, storytelling coming out of the book. And at 10 o'clock, we walked across around the building, up 5 concrete steps, and she rang the bell on a big door, and a tall nun came to the door, took one look through the screen door, and said, "I'll be there in a minute." And she came back with a tray, and we sat down, all 3 of us, on those steps, and we had a tray of cold milk, homemade bread, heavy with jelly. And that was our treat every morning. Now, when you have an experience like that, you can remember everything about it. And that happened to be a very beautiful memory, very beautiful. But all our children that are having to do things differently at home are also having that problem. They're going to remember what goes on in a quarantine for the rest of their lives. That's what I think, because I remembered everything. I loved some of it. I remembered everything. I did. So that was very, very good. It was a good thing. My mother later had a secret for a recipe that she had for her favorite food. When she was a young woman working downtown, she was a secretary at a business building, and she went every day to a place called the S&W. It was a big building, but it had a big room, and it was set up as a dining room. So you went in there, walked down a line, and picked out the food that you wanted. What she did, she said, was that there was only one thing that she liked at the S&W, and it was the macaroni salad. And she took it every day. She went there every day for lunch for about 6 months because she was tasting. She wanted to be able to make it herself. And it was subtle, subtle. So she learned how to put most of it in. She had the small macaronis already cooked. And then she added small pieces of onion. Very good. And then she had to have olives stuffed with pimento, which she then sliced, and that went into the salad. And then yellow cheese cut into very small pieces. That could be either cheddar cheese or rat cheese, but just small pieces. And it never tasted right to her. She kept trying and trying, and it didn't taste right to her. So finally she said, "It doesn't taste right." And she kept looking and going down to the S&W and eating. And finally, she figured it out. She took the bowl empty first and smothered butter on the sides of the bowl. And then she had a garlic, and she cut it in half, took those halves and rubbed them around on the side to give the garlic flavor, but not too much, just enough. And then she pushed all the rest of the stuff in there, stirred it up with salt and pepper. And the other piece of magic that you had to put in it was Duke's mayonnaise. Nothing else satisfied. It had to be Duke's mayonnaise, and that made it its deliciousness. Well, when I thought about that the other day, I don't think about this food all the time, but sometimes I do. I remember things and I thought about going to the refectory and eating that homemade bread. And then that brought up this S&W. And then I was into the macaroni salad. And so I made some. I had a big bowl and I cooked the macaroni and I had everything that I needed because I already knew. And I made this bowl full of macaroni salad. And I ate it all myself. I ate little bits for about 3 days. And I've never enjoyed anything as much for a long time. That if there's been something that you've really loved, whether you're in a quarantine or not, if there's anything strange or unpleasant going on in your life, if you're anything like I am, you will find something wonderful to eat that you've always loved. Well, fix a big bowl of it and enjoy yourself. Thank you for coming. You can have that recipe all the way from homemade bread, thick, thick, thick homemade jelly, which will make a child happy, especially if there's something cold to go with it. And then make your macaroni salad. I hope you'll come back soon. We'll have more stories.